making contributions that push Canada and the world forward. Yet for too long, women have been confronted and limited by the proverbial glass ceiling. As we break through that ceiling, we're now asking, what lies beyond? For every success story, there are still countless women facing challenges, bias, and discrimination. Together, we're celebrating successes, addressing the root causes of these barriers, and cultivating a more sustainable and equitable future for women in tech. This is the Elevate Main Stage.
All right, welcome back, everyone. How was lunch? How are we feeling? Good. Some of us are feeling good, others not so much. That's okay, it's normal. No, we're gonna continue the fun as we continue our second half of our program. We're happy that you all are here. For those that are new, I'm Allie Love. I'm your host for the day. It's been a pleasure and such a great learning experience. And so as we get into our next segment, let's start to put some thought in our head, right? Reading the news in 2023 can be daunting. With so many businesses facing challenges and going into bankruptcy, it can be triggering for those who are looking to take a risk of growing a business. For a look at how founders can interpret the news and reinvent their businesses, please welcome Dragon's Den host and business news correspondent for CBC News, Dianne Buckner, and star of CBC's Dragon's Den and general partners of District Ventures Capital, Arlene Dickinson.
Hello, everyone, and hello, Arlene.
Hey, Diane.
How are you feeling?
Good. I mean, 2,400 people, no big deal.
Yes, no big deal. I want to congratulate you. Season 18 of Dragon's Den just went last Thursday. Another exciting episode on tonight. I have to ask you, though, do you still find it sort of surprising, some of the ideas people come up with?
Oh, 100%. I'm always amazed at the innovation in Canada and the courage of the entrepreneurs in this room and in the country. It's never dull.
Absolutely. So now you and I both share a real passion for the entrepreneurial dream, but we come at it, of course, from very different angles. Arlene is an entrepreneur and probably helps countless entrepreneurs succeed through her venture capital fund, through Dragon's Den, through her various investments. I cover business and report on the stories that affect entrepreneurs. So we thought we'd kind of meet in the middle of those two perspectives and talk about news and business today. For example, just the other day I saw this headline in the Globe, maybe some of you guys saw it too. It was "Prepare for 5 to 10 years of financial disruption." I was like, oh, that sounds great. Really wasn't hard enough trying to start a business without all of that on top of it. But you talked about that there's a way to interpret the news as an entrepreneur. What do you mean by that?
I think it's so easy as entrepreneurs to read those headlines and get discouraged and depressed and wondering, how you're going to navigate yet another hill to climb because, heaven knows we are constantly climbing mountains and only to see that there's another mountain right behind the one we just did. And this is one of those things that when we get absorbed in the news, if we start to believe every story we read as kind of some sort of moniker for what's going to happen to the future of our business, we can become overwhelmed. It can shut down our enthusiasm, it can cloud our perspectives, and it can make us do things that we might not otherwise do. Now, I'm not saying that you shouldn't read news about inflation and think about, from a common sense perspective, how are you going to manage the cost of inflation, how are you going to make sure your businesses can succeed through it. But I am saying that our mental state is equally as important as our financial state, especially as entrepreneurs as we go through kind of how are we going to navigate the financial state. So I just think it's positive thinking. There's lots of scientific data that says having a positive thought is actually going to impact the way you view the world. So it's not about having fewer negative thoughts, it's about having more positive thoughts. And so I would encourage everybody to not get hung up on the news cycles, because heaven knows they change every 12 minutes or 2 minutes or 10 seconds nowadays. But to think about, what it means in the context of your life, whether or not you think this is something that you need to act on, or whether it's just another piece of news that is surrounding you and not going to impact your business.
Do you feel that you ever get discouraged? Like you personally, as you mentioned, inflation and all the pandemic and interest rates and what's going on in the labor market. There's so many different stories that have been negative, and certainly the technology sector has probably seen more than its fair share of negative headlines. Do you ever get discouraged?
All the time. I get, listen, I suffer from anxiety. I have panic attacks when things are bad. And sometimes I don't even know, back to, you don't even understand the impact these things we're reading are having on us until we wake up in the middle of the night in a sweat, or until we have an anxiety attack and we don't even understand what's happened and how the stress is building up in our bodies. So I do get discouraged. I do get depressed by it. And I think that is the hallmark of a good entrepreneur, is the ability to find that place of encouragement, that iron will that lets you go on. That's the tenacity we speak about, the persistence that you all hear about all the time. These are the things that get you through, because it's so easy to get overwhelmed by it all and to be depressed or discouraged. I remember when, just as a quick segue, Dianne, I know we were going to talk about this, but I remember raising my fund. If you want to talk about being discouraged, raising my first fund. I was 58 years old when I raised my first fund, and everybody told me I'd never raised a fund before. I didn't know what I was doing in the space, even though I had invested almost my entire career. I was a female GP. I was doing it in a space that nobody had ever done it in, which was the food and health space in a major way. I was too ambitious. I mean, I can tell you the things I was told. And I remember one day I wanted to raise $100 million, and I was walking down the street. I'd come from yet one more no. I mean, you would think because I'm a dragon, because I have a profile in the country, you would think it would be easy for me to raise capital. It was not. It was very difficult. I had a lot of no's because it was in a nascent space, because it was the first time I was an emerging fund manager. And I remember coming out of yet another no meeting where a family office had said, we really like the idea. And as I left, I thought, well, the only reason they wanted to meet with me was because I was a television personality. It had nothing to do with what I was actually presenting. And I was so discouraged. And I walked down the street and picked up the phone and called my lawyer, who had done all our fund formation papers. And I said, listen, I don't think I could do this. I don't want to do this. It's just too hard. I'd raised $16 million of the 100. It felt like I was never going to get to the 100. And I just didn't think I had it in me. And he said to me, Arlene, go home and put on your big girl panties and get back out there and do it again. And, we all need that kick in the pants sometimes from people who will tell us the truth. And when he said it, I thought, he's right. I can't let this negativity overwhelm me and make me feel that I'm not good enough and undermine my confidence in myself, because I knew this was a good idea. And so it was very difficult to raise the first $100 million. We raised it. We're now raising our second fund, but very discouraged quite often. You just have to get through it.
Well, you just launched that second fund, I think just in the last few weeks. How would you describe the marketplace right now?
I mean, I can't imagine how many times you guys have heard over the course of the last couple of days how hard it is to raise capital right now. It is really tough out there. There's trillions of dollars sitting on the sidelines in our country, which is just a shame. A lot of pension funds and other large institutional money that's not prepared to invest in either as fund of funds or invest in directly in companies, and it's creating this. It's creating a couple of things. It's creating discouragement. It's creating a lack of, I'd say, homegrown initiatives that actually can do something globally. So we see a lot of people leaving the country again to try and find capital, although I think it's hard to get capital pretty much anywhere right now. But you're starting to see some signs that letting up, because they can't sit on their money forever. They have to invest it. They have to get a return. So I believe that cycle is shifting, that you're going to see more and more loosening of those purse strings, and you're going to see more and more investment back into tech, back into other spaces and sectors.
I hope you're right.
From my lips to God's ears, right?
Yes.
Let's hope.
Now, during the pandemic, a lot of companies naturally had to adjust plans and make contingency plans and to strategize, be creative. And we start to hear this word reinvention a lot. I'm curious, all these different companies that you are working with, have a lot of them had to reinvent? What are you telling them and what are they seeing?
Well, we were talking about this earlier, that the word pivot, I mean, is anyone else tired of hearing the word pivot? It was like, reinvention really takes this ability to look at yourself and decide whether you can take everything you've learned and reapply it into a new direction. And that's less about pivoting as much as it is about kind of understanding what your currency is and what you own and what you're good at and what the market needs. And so sometimes you have to go to a completely different sector. Sometimes you have to go to a completely different product. Sometimes you have to think about a completely different career path. Reinvention is generally a result of a crisis. And I am a big believer that you should reinvent yourself, not when a crisis happens, but when you are ready to reinvent yourself and you know you want to do something else. So we get in this trap. We get divorced, we lose a job, a crisis happens in the marketplace, such as COVID, and we use that as the impetus for us to think about what we really want to be in life. And I would encourage all of you as entrepreneurs to think instead about what you want right now. Who are you? What is it that you're good at? What does the market need from you? You know, these are things, you know, look back at your history and kind of take that good stuff with you as opposed to thinking you have to leave it all behind. There is good learning in your history, right and wrong. And so reinventing yourself means having the courage to look at who you are at any point in time, not because a crisis has forced you to look at who you are. Because if you wait for then, you might wait too long. And we all have such great things that we all want to do, and our dreams are so high. And I mean, I want to do a quick, I actually want to do, if I can do a quick little exercise. I want you all in this room to raise your hands as high as you possibly can. Okay? Okay. Got it? Keep them up. Now I want you to raise them higher. And I want you to think about what you just did. That is so Canadian. I asked you, right? Like I said to you, raise your hands as high as you can. Like, God forbid the person beside me thinks I've raised it too high. Who do I think I am, right? And this courage to be able to raise our hands high, to take that, to have the courage and the belief in ourselves is something this nation needs in spades. We need you to raise your hands as high as you possibly can and to be less concerned about what other people think of you and consider about your idea and more concerned about what you're doing for yourself and how you're reinventing to be who you want to be. And it starts with the confidence that you have a right to be on the stage raising your hand high. This is something I feel very deeply about in Canada, this whole tall poppy syndrome. It's such crap. Everybody has an obligation to live their life as loudly as they can, as big as they can, as deeply as you can, because none of us want to be on our deathbed saying, I wish I had. And then we'll look back and say, why didn't I? And you'll go, well, because I didn't want people to talk about me or pay attention to me or look at me. Those are bad reasons to not do what you want to do.
I thought you were going to say go as high as you can. And I thought you were going to say, is that as high as you can? And that you wanted people to stand up.
Well, I do. I want people to stand up as high as they, and raise their hands as high as they can.
Absolutely. Wow. So now this year, 2023, every year it seems is challenging in a different way. But if I think about 22 and it was winding up, everybody was saying there was going to be a big recession this year. I mean, okay, it has not been, a fabulous year economically, but we haven't really hit that point. And I'm wondering if there's sometimes a risk of entrepreneurs getting too optimistic. If the headlines are good, if you are seeing positive signs, and part of the reason I bring this up, I have a bit of a personal connection here, just in the sense that my son got laid off from Shopify last year, which was his dream job. He loved it, loved working there, was doing very well. He was in sales. And so I was watching all of that story unfold very closely. And one of the things that the CEO of Shopify said was that part of why they were in the situation they were in was that they had, in a sense, built out too far, that the e-commerce boom that came during the pandemic, they thought it might last forever. And it makes me think about optimism. Like, entrepreneurs are by nature, I think, optimistic. You don't start a business if you're a pessimist, right? And that's what I've loved about covering entrepreneurs, is so many are incredibly resourceful and energetic and optimistic and let's go. And I'm just curious about that thought, that yes, the net headlines have been pretty discouraging for quite some time now, but when it does start to get good, do you think there's a risk that people get too high on it all?
I think that there's a difference between blind passion and passion. And so you need to pay attention to what the market's doing, and you need to be optimistic about what you believe you're going to deliver in the market, product market fit, making sure your margins and your costs and out, like all of the things that you have to do that are basic business fundamentals. But for me, success as an entrepreneur lies at the intersection of purpose and passion. When you find your purpose in life, your why do you get out of bed every day? Why are you doing what you're doing? And trust me, your answer will be different to the person next to you. It might be because of your family. It might be because you believe something so deeply that you can't not do it. Whatever your why is, your purpose, when you marry that with your passion, your real belief that this is something you love doing and you get up every day to do because you're passionate about it. When those things happen, you find success. When you get led by just one or the other, you tend to be easily skewed by what you're seeing. You're seeing it through the eyes and lens of whatever you believe. So I think that you have to measure that. I think you have to look at the headlines. I think you have to always be optimistic, but you have to be, cautiously optimistic. You can't be just blindly passionate and say, oh, this is going to be great. Listen, I think the market would have said Shopify did what they should have done. They took advantage of the time in the marketplace and they built out what they thought, and they have done a job of recovering through that now. These things happen. You know what, you guys, shit happens in business. Like, you're going to go through, you're going to be blindsided by some of your team. You're going to be blindsided by the market. You're going to be blindsided by a partner. It is what this is. But isn't that why we do it? Because don't we love the messiness of it? I mean, if it was easy and if it was just everybody gets along and there's never going to be any surprises, that would be pretty boring as far as I'm concerned.
That's why we love it on Dragon's Den when the dragons fight. They
I'm
were
always right.
getting a little bit sketchy. Robert Herjavec and Wes Hall were at the premiere last week, and I think Vince was saying we're going to get a marriage counselor in here for you. But the messier it gets, sometimes there's something about us that enjoys that part of it too, right?
There's a truth in messiness. Sometimes it's so easy to get overwhelmed. Listen, I think there's the truth in messiness is that when stuff's going on around you and you think you're being treated unfairly or things are somehow being directed at you and you feel like people don't have all the answers, it's easy to become defensive, right? We put ourselves on, well, what do they know? They just they don't understand everything. And the other side, generally the reason they're blaming you is because they don't have all the answers and they don't have all the knowledge that they need. And really the way to bring those two things together is to communicate and share with each other the knowledge that you have. This is another thing Canadians really suck at. We are terrible about sharing information with each other. We're afraid of each other. We compete instead of collaborate. And in this room, if you take the brain power in this room and you asked a competitor and you sat down with them and you said, I'm thinking about these things, they may actually help you enormously. We're so afraid people will steal our ideas that we don't create bigger ideas as a result. So it's interesting.
I remember hearing somebody say, great ideas are easy, right? Like, you can come up with the idea. It's really about execution. And execution comes from, as you're saying, collaboration. Yeah. So we just have a couple minutes left here, Arlene. I'm just wondering, when you look ahead to 2024, what are you seeing?
I'm seeing a resurgence of hope, with a little bit of fear still in our minds. We're still concerned. COVID left a mark on all of us. Certainly we have a lot of fear, but I see a lot of hope. I think we're all hoping for better and more and for our country to be stronger and better, and that happens when you know, everybody in this room gets out of bed every day and does what they do. So I'm optimistic. I am optimistic. I'm cautiously optimistic.
And where does that faith come from? I mean, you've talked a lot today about, you know, anxiety and fear and worrying about things and all the rest of it. But obviously, like, you've been so successful. You've helped so many entrepreneurs. You know, your own company has been fabulously successful. But through all those tough times, like, what do you think is kind of at the core that gives you your belief of, like, I'll keep going, I'm going to keep that positive mindset, the things you're telling people here today to hold on to? How do you do that yourself?
Because I believe at the heart of every entrepreneur is a desire to leave a legacy, to do something that makes a difference, whether that difference be economic, whether that difference be social. I think we all have that purpose part I talked about, and nothing gets me more excited than helping entrepreneurs to be successful, because if they're going to be successful, I'll be successful. And so I don't know, like, listen, I'm not, I've got lots of challenges. I don't do many things really well. I know I'll never be a supermodel, but I can buy a supermodel agency.
Do you want to talk about your pen?
Oh, I do want to talk about my pin. Thanks, Diane. I'm wearing this, just very quickly, I'm wearing this pin. September 30th is Truth and Reconciliation Day in Canada. We wear this pin in honor of the children that went to residential schools that you know, suffered enormously, and the Indigenous people who suffered. And so I would encourage you all to please take a moment on September 30th, buy a pin, support the Orange Pin Society.
All right. Well, that's it for us today. Thank you so much for being here and listening. And I know I speak for both of us when we say we wish you all the best, a fabulous day, fabulous weekend, fabulous future.
Sorry, it's the Orange Shirt Society. I said that wrong. Yeah, good luck, everybody.
Close enough.
Thank you. Thank
All
you
right.
very much.